Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
Yes, that's right. Depeche Mode, the podcast, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. And welcome to this listener feedback, answering emails heavy episode of the show. So a couple of items before we dive into your emails this week. For those of you that listen via the podcast and not on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed the treat from earlier this week. For those that do enjoy this on YouTube, I hope you will take the time to go to the podcast, because I was able to track down the cleanest version of In the End, taken from the Depeche Mode film M and its end credits. And it is the complete song, minus about 10 seconds at the beginning. So somebody, as I suspected would happen, went and recorded live the new song from the Memento Mori sessions, In the End. I've played it before, but a much rougher copy on a previous episode. They must have done this at a subsequent screening during the Tribeca Film Festival. But it's one of the cleanest versions of the track that I've heard so far. The only problem with the record was the first, like I said, 10 or 15 seconds was cut off. So what I did was, because I do have some mad editing skills, that's what 29 years of radio will get you. I can go and re-edit songs. So I pulled a portion of the track from the end and then put it at the beginning and basically created my own intro to make up for the lack of the beginning of the song. So I have no idea if that's how the song starts. Be that as it may, my edit is available via the podcast in its entirety on the whatever podcast platform you use to listen to podcasts. And it's a fairly clean version. I mean, it's a bootleg version, make no mistake. So it has a bit of that echo to it, but I've been listening to it on a daily basis. And I took the time to go and beef up and try to clean up the audio a bit. But it is just In the End. There's nothing else added to it. There's a lot of mixes that have been done based off of what people have found in terms of the recordings that people did during some of those festivals. But this was clearly the cleanest version that I had heard so far, and serves to fill in the stopgap until we actually get the official release here in a couple of months. And hopefully it comes along with those other 3 tracks that we're waiting for. Light 2.0, Loose Cannon, and I always forget the name of the third one. I want to take a moment, though, and talk about the song itself, because I heard somebody make a comment, and I can't remember exactly where it was. It might have been on the home forum, the Depeche-Mode forum. But I heard somebody make a comment that maybe the band left the track off the album because it shares some similarities with Ghosts Again in terms of the lyrical content. I can see that argument being made, but even then, considering the theming of Memento Mori around death, that song would have absolutely fit in with the context of the rest of the album. I mean, as a matter of fact, this is not a comment on the quality of the songs that it were included on Memento Mori, but just with the theme and the title of the album alone, that track fits in much better than, say, Always You or People Are Good, Caroline's Monkey. Again, I'm not commenting on, well, maybe not Caroline's Monkey, but certainly Always You and People Are Good, keeping with the theme of the album. And it's a really strong song. I know it's subjective, and I know a lot of people, especially when we've gone through potential, set lists, right? Dream set lists of varying nature in terms of how we put those together. But I know that, there's a lot of B-sides out there that I don't particularly care for, but I saw a consensus of you who appreciated those songs. And so when it comes to a song like In the End, that to me almost seems singles worthy. It has a vibe to it that reminds me of Black Celebration. And really interesting, not just instrumentation, but the way that the lyrics are formed and how much of Martin is included in the track and how the vocals even step on each other a little bit as it moves through to the chorus between Dave singing the song itself and then Martin coming in with the chorus aspect of it and then Dave joining him on the In the End in the chorus part of the song. I just feel it's an incredibly strong track. And the more that I listen to it, the more surprised I am that it wasn't included on the album. So I'm adding this to the list of songs that the list of questions that I will ask Martin or Dave when I am given the opportunity. Why didn't you include In the End on the album? Because that is a really strong track. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. I haven't received a lot of feedback from releasing the entirety of the song on the podcast. That being said, most of the time my feedback ends up coming from the YouTube channel, people that comment, and I did not put it up on YouTube just because I didn't want to get hit with a cease and desist. I saw that there were some other versions of the song that had been yanked down by the label. I can get away with that on the podcast. I can't get away with doing that on YouTube, and I didn't want to see my channel get dinged. So, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And speaking from hearing from you, got a lot of listener feedback to dive into this week, so let's not waste any time. First off, Jon writes in and says this: I really enjoyed the 50s version of Violator. You probably know the country cover of People Are People for VW that uses a similar approach. So it wasn't a shock. This optimistic or shiny makeover has no negative impact on the songs, just the contrast between the vibe of the music and the meaning of clean that made me giggle a bit. I like such unexpected covers. Take, for instance, Lillian by Rotten Tomatoes. They took a mediocre song, I agree with you on that, and turned it into a delightful blend of punk, ska, death metal, and funk. Check it out if you don't know it. I can imagine Martin laughing loudly when they start playing the funky part. This cover, together with Martin and Dave's take on the final countdown and their hair massage interview on the big ones with Simon Amstel, are the most entertaining pieces of Depeche Mode-related media I know. What are yours? Oh, interesting. My favorite pieces, entertaining pieces of Depeche Mode media. That's hard. I mean, I love all the documentaries. I constantly watch at least once a year, if not more, all the documentaries that are attached to the remastered versions of the albums. I am the interviews that were done for the best of release. And unfortunately, my DVD doesn't work anymore. I need to track those down. But I thought that the documentary on that was really, really good, especially as they went from song to song to song with interviews of the band intermixed with the covers of each of the singles. I really thought that that was done really well. The documentary on the singles release as well are really good documentaries. More recently, the interview that the band did with Zach Lowe, I thought was absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed that interview. So, as always, thank you for the comment, Jon. And let me make one more little comment on this. Adding to the questions that I would ask the band if given the chance. It seems like earlier, going back to their peak, kind of starting with Songs of Faith and Devotion, but when you look at the earlier albums, and especially Violator, only having 9 tracks, but 9 really strong tracks, there are so many different times when you look at all the releases that came post Songs of Faith and Devotion, starting with Ultra and then down the line. Those albums could have been tightened up so much. And I think specifically, like Sounds of the Universe and Playing the Angel, and then the rest. And and I'll even go through, Spirit and Memento Mori as well, that there's a lot of tracks on those albums that I feel like could have been resigned to B-sides and made a much tighter album. Probably the biggest example I would give is Sounds of the Universe. I think that album had some really, really strong tracks on it, and unfortunately, it was kind of spiked in with a lot of mediocre ones. I just thought about this because of Lillian, and a track that was mediocre, in my opinion, that if they had left off the album, I feel like could have created a much tighter release and could have been resigned to a B-side. So I'd be very curious to see why it seems like the band was open more so than they were in the early years to adding more songs that I would typically think they would save as B-sides. If you have any thoughts on that, drop me an email. All right, Glen 1965 writes in and says, regarding Dave not recalling in the end, I think it was just his humor and the fact that as a late addition, this song would have been recorded some 2 years plus previously. That's a good point. So a lot of time and no performance of this song since. Yeah, makes sense. Interesting that you should find the bonus edition pre-populated within the Apple catalog. Why would it be there? Someone somewhere must have entered this. I hope this is right, perhaps for release alongside the film. All right, so friend of the show, Jeff, messaged me, and I should have remembered this, and I didn't. I don't think it was Depeche Mode related. I had completely forgot that the band Flyleaf, of which I'm actually a fan, had released an album several years back called Memento Mori. And that album, Memento Mori by Flyleaf, also included a bonus edition. So I think that while my discovery was true, my speculation was wrong. And that it turns out that preloaded Memento Mori bonus edition was actually attached to the Flyleaf album and not Depeche Mode. So, my apologies for getting you excited if I did over the course of the past week. But I wanted to let you know what I had discovered. All right. Per Winding writes this. Hey, John, you now have a new subscriber. I'm 55 years of age. I've been a fan of Depeche Mode since I was 11 or 12 years old. Very good content. Welcome. Glad to have you here, especially someone of a similar age, as I am 53. We Depeche Mode fans are getting up there. Speaking of getting up there, happy birthday to Martin Gore, who turned 64 this past week. All right, Michael Tennant, Tennant Music, writes this. I know this is going to come across like I'm having a pity party, but it drives me nuts how much attention AI-generated music gets when I'm putting out real music and only a handful of listeners find it. I get the novelty, but damn, it's frustrating. Now, Pont Duhawk, responding to Michael Tennant, writes this. I share your sentiment. It's fascinating. AI can create a decent song in a matter of seconds, where it takes me almost a month for a non-vocal instrumental track. My optimistic take is that AI music will eventually be banned from all major music streaming platforms, since the assumption is that as an artist, you are using these platforms to share your unique art and to get recognized for your talent and skill. 100% AI-generated music is entirely void of this premise. There is no creative or technical skill required to type in a prompt and to have an app spit out a song. There is a fine line, however. What if you use AI to generate a vocal or a spoken word track in your song? Or you use AI to generate weird new samples. I think artists, labels, and streaming platforms and AI creators need to come together and somehow figure out a fair solution. You know, you create an interesting scenario, and I had a conversation with, I have a friend of mine, used to be a global threat analyst, ran his own company, Valens Global, testified in Congress a ton. He's one of the foremost experts on European terrorism. But he's left that field and has now moved into AI-generated gaming, and he runs Valens Games. I actually asked him this morning about the possibility of streaming platforms banning AI, and he said that probably wouldn't happen simply because AI-generated music is going to be so... what's the word I'm looking for? The proliferation of AI in music will be so abundant that it would be near impossible to do so, meaning that even traditional artists will begin at some point to be utilizing AI in some way when working on their songs, just in the production part of it. Of course, if you take a stance and don't use it at all, but when you consider how AI is infiltrating so many facets of our lives, one can easily extrapolate that to ban anything AI-related outright may be just a complete impossibility in the future. But I thought the comment and the reply to Michael Tennant was rather interesting, given that AI does present the possibility where an individual who is really good at creating music and beats, but perhaps does not have the vocal chops, maybe they're good at writing lyrics as well, they could go and utilize AI to provide the vocals for the music that they are creating. I think there's a lot of really good opportunities out there, and I am confident that consumers will be able to differentiate, and there will always be a place for for lack of a better way to describe it, traditional musicians over those that are focusing on AI. You know, it's funny, we created an AI song for my show, and it's become incredibly popular. It's a really, really good, catchy song. But it's created by AI. No, I'm not making any money off of it. I'm just using that as an example. But I certainly can understand and share the frustration that, musicians have over songs getting attention over others and the novelty of it. But just like anything, I mean, you go back to Napster and how many things changed in the wake of file sharing services, and how now we figured out a new way in order to consume music and purchase our music, for good or bad. I think the same thing will ring true relating to AI as well. All right, lastly, let's get into Ron. Ron wrote me last week. I just simply did not get a chance to get to his email, so I'm going to share it with you this week. Sir, writes Ron, I think I agree with most of your take on this, but why not reason it out? The natural line of delineation between what I call classic Depeche Mode and late Depeche Mode is, to most, Alan's departure. My delineation is classic and 21st century. The cutoff is the singles 86 to 98. I can hear the screams now about Ultra not being classic. I agree. That's a dilemma. I don't consider Ultra to be 21st century per se. Not only since it spans 96 and 97, but the very change in sound and the composition from Ultra to Exciter is very distinct. The dilemma appears to be because that also applies for the change between Ultra and Songs of Faith and Devotion. Let me stop here for just a moment. I actually agree with you. I think that delineation and stopping at Ultra is the proper, if you're going to make a delineation within the band's timeline, I agree with you that Ultra is the end point, and then it restarts. Even though Alan is out of the mix, and most people use Alan as the delineation point, Ultra was still carrying on, even just, I'll say in spirit, even though Alan didn't die, but even just in spirit was carrying on what Alan had done. And Tim Simonon being brought on for Ultra was absolutely the intent of him to fill the hole for Alan. And in doing so, he created very similar landscape or soundscapes and that cinematic feel that Alan would provide for the band. Would Ultra have sounded different if it were that Alan had stayed? Well, of course it would. But a lot of things would have been different. I mean, in terms of Dave's recovery, the importance of the band to Dave, Alan leaving, the impact that had on Dave and the rest of the band members as well. I mean, there's a lot of what-ifs involved there. Now, getting back to Ron's post, he says, the dilemma appears to be, because that also applies for the change between Ultra and Songs of Faith and Devotion, Ultra lies in this transitional zone. To me, Exciter is the album that really ushered in a mature post-Allen band. Completely agree. Even if they were still trying to find their new footing, I feel that they ultimately did that with Playing the Angel. Everything hence up to Spirit all fit a recognizable sound and anticipatory degree of theme and experimentation. It flows the way the Construction Time Again through Violator did. It's an era. Memento Mori broke that mold, in my opinion. Interesting. And if the band had 20 more years left in them, we would see a third era. Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think you make a really good point. Now back to Ultra. And it's interesting, too, really quick. That dividing line with Memento Mori, I think, has a lot in common with the delineation going back to Allen leaving, with the departure of Fletch, Martin, and Dave going out of the Lone, using the same producer as Spirit, but bringing on Marta Solongni. I think all of those things play into a new era that I hope at least lasts another album. Ultra has so many hints and relics from the previous 4 albums. Some commented back during its release that it sounded like the natural progression from Violator if Songs of Faith and Devotion had never existed. I think the band actually said that as well. I take some issue with that opinion, but the elements are there. I bet the band thought so too, maybe sticking to a more familiar and comfortable sonic environment to avoid the struggle that was Songs of Faith and Devotion's development. The subsequent singles, 86 through 98, was a necessary and strategic move to cap the millennium. They were ready to tour and needed to release to promote. Yes, Depeche Mode uses albums to promote tours, while everyone else must do the opposite. This leaves Ultra in an awkward spot of being such a damned beautiful collection of subtle echoes from a bygone electronic crescendos mixed with newborn signs of creative relief. Pulled in one direction by the massive and overbearing Songs of Faith and Devotion, and another by what only a nearly fatal series of life events can inspire. Ultra will always have a special place for me. It was the album that spanned my university years, along with the singles 86 through 98. And the first one, where I had the opportunity to buy and listen to it, and its singles as they were released. Finally, on the topic of a new singles collection, the singles 01 to 24 sounds like an adequate and satisfying capstone to the 21st century Depeche Mode. I hope they continue the artwork theme from 86 to 98, which was applied to the re-release of the 81 to 85, as you all remember. The neuro-spicy side of me would very much appreciate that consistency. The idea of releasing the final tracks from Memento Mori as singles or B-sides is reasonable, but I think all of them will come out with M. The new singles collection is the band's chance to give something new, and I bet Martin's conjured up new material already. All that said, the tour is almost perfunctory, and might as well be one of the few to admit it. It'd likely turn out to be a farewell tour. If that's the case, then they'd obviously have to play their entire collection, not just from 2001 and on. Obviously, expect all the singles, maybe 1 or 2 surprise drops. Feel free to skip this part if you choose if you share my ramble, but I included a potential set list, so we'll go with the set list. We like reading a good set list here. And my apologies, by the way. I know my voice is a little scratchy and dry. It happens sometimes. I did my show this morning and been talking a lot this week. It's Thursday when I'm recording, so I'm a little fried. Let's see. So, Ron's set list goes as follows. World in My Eyes, A Question of Time. It's No Good, Precious. Walking in My Shoes, Behind the Wheel. Blasphemous Rumors. Nice. Ghosts Again, A Question of Lust, Home. Leave in Silence, and then we get a new song. New Life, Updated. Interesting. A Pain That I'm Used To. Stripped, Wrong, Policy of Truth. Strange Love, I Feel You, another new song, Enjoy the Silence, Personal Jesus, Everything Counts, Just Can't Get Enough, Never Let Me Down Again. Thanks, as always, Ron. No, Ron, thank you. All right, I'm going to rest my voice because I have one more show to do tomorrow. But thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. I always appreciate it. Listen, if you like to read science fiction, I hope you'll check out my science fiction space opera series. It's called EMBARK. 7 books in all make up the entire series, where, after Earth faces its end in 2172, you'll follow pilots Taft Catha, along with their crew, on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. It is a fun, fast-paced, and action-packed science fiction adventure with a lot of 80s through 2000s nostalgia attached and a lot of Depeche Mode references, direct and indirect. It's a sci-fi adventure without an agenda. Filled with romance, action, a lot of cool technology. Pick up EMBARK Book 1 today. Written for adults, but also completely age-appropriate for those 11 and older. Available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook, all on Amazon.com. Search for EMBARK and Jon, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for hanging out with me again this week. I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. God bless to all the devotees, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening
Depeche Mode, the podcast.